There exists within every human soul a deep, unseen terrain, an interior world woven with symbols, instincts, dreams, and truths unspoken. To ignore this world is to remain a stranger to oneself, but to explore it is to stand before a mirror not of vanity, but of transformation. In the heart of the feminine psyche there lies immense power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that shapes. Often misunderstood, this power hides behind projections, personas, and cultural expectations. It is not weakness nor submission, it is mystery, depth, and creation. But like all true power, it contains both light and shadow. Beneath surface behaviors and social masks lies a darker current, an unconscious drive toward control, seduction, nurturing, and even destruction. These are not flaws, they are fragments of a deeper architecture. The feminine contains the archetype of the mother and the seductress, the maiden and the witch, the healer and the destroyer. When denied, they become distorted. When faced, they become transformative. The journey is not to suppress these elements, but to understand them, to see where love becomes manipulation, where care hides control, where softness becomes strategy. Awareness of these patterns frees both women and men from cycles of pain. It allows the feminine spirit to rise not in imitation of power, but in authentic sovereignty. Those who walk this path do not seek to conquer the world, but to integrate the worlds within. To bring the unconscious into consciousness is the noblest act of psychological courage, for in the union of our opposites, of shadow and light, of masculine and feminine, we become whole. The Anima archetype represents one of the most profound and compelling forces within the human psyche. It is the feminine image or dimension within the unconscious mind of a man. Far from being merely a passive or decorative presence, the anima plays a transformative role in shaping thoughts, behaviors, relationships, and inner life. Rooted deeply in the collective unconscious, the anima embodies all the psychological tendencies and traits that are culturally associated with the feminine, but repressed or unrecognized in the conscious masculine mind. The anima is not a fixed personality, rather she evolves over the course of a man's life through various stages and symbolic representations. In early development she might appear as the mother figure, both nurturing and smothering, symbolizing the first deep emotional connection a man experiences. As he matures, this figure can take on the characteristics of a young maiden or seductress, often idealized in ways that are unrealistic or overly romantic. Later in life, the anima may transform again into a wise woman or spiritual guide, signaling a deepened psychological integration. These stages reflect the man's growing ability to relate to his own emotions, intuition, and inner world, rather than remaining fixated on external projections or fantasies. In many ways, the anima acts as a bridge to the unconscious. When a man dreams, feels intuitively, or becomes emotionally overwhelmed, it is often the anima's influence at play. She invites him to look inward, to confront aspects of himself he might otherwise ignore: vulnerability, longing, creativity, and empathy. She also appears in dreams and visions, often symbolized by a mysterious woman, an artist, a lover, or even a witch. These figures can be benevolent or frightening depending on the state of the man's relationship with his unconscious. The anima is not simply a benign muse. When repressed or denied, she can distort reality, provoke emotional chaos, or lead a man into obsessive or irrational behavior. One of the central tasks in personal development is to recognize how the anima shapes perception. Many men unconsciously project their anima onto real women, especially romantic partners. This projection can cause confusion and disappointment when the woman fails to live up to the idealized image the man has created. She is not the muse, the savior, or the seductress he imagines. She is herself an independent being. The emotional fallout from this projection is often what initiates deeper psychological work. When the illusion collapses, a man is forced to confront the inner source of these expectations. It is in this confrontation that real growth can occur. Working with the anima archetype is not about rejecting the feminine or trying to control it. It is about understanding its place within the internal landscape. The anima holds the key to emotional maturity. She invites openness, receptivity, and sensitivity, qualities often underdeveloped in men due to social conditioning. By facing her honestly, a man becomes capable of richer emotional experiences, deeper relationships, and a more nuanced understanding of himself. He begins to balance the hard lines of ego and logic with the fluidity of feeling and imagination. This process of integrating the anima is part of a larger psychological journey known as individuation. Individuation is the path toward becoming a whole and balanced self. For a man, this means recognizing that his psyche is not purely rational or aggressive, but also intuitive, creative, and emotionally complex. The anima often serves as a guide on this journey. She challenges him to explore the deeper layers of his personality, the hidden motives and unhealed wounds. She can lead him through periods of confusion, heartbreak, and disillusionment, but also through breakthroughs of insight, art, and wisdom. It is important to note that the anima is shaped not only by personal experience, but also by cultural imagery and myth. Stories, films, and media often present exaggerated versions of the feminine, either angelic or demonic. These images feed into the unconscious and influence how the anima is formed. A man might unconsciously internalize the archetype of the damsel in distress, the femme fatale, or the nurturing mother, and then unknowingly seek these qualities in the women around him. These projections create tension and misunderstanding in relationships because no person can live up to a myth. By withdrawing these projections, a man begins to see others more clearly, free of the distortions of his unconscious expectations. When the anima is integrated rather than projected, she becomes an inner companion rather than an external obsession. She appears less in the form of emotional volatility and more as a voice of insight, a sense of inner peace, or a surge of creative energy. This is the moment when the psyche begins to harmonize. The inner feminine no longer opposes the masculine ego but enriches it. The man becomes more fully human, not divided but complete. Ultimately, the anima archetype reveals that the path to inner harmony requires courage, honesty, and humility. It requires the willingness to listen to the voice within, to honor emotion as much as logic, and to accept complexity over simplicity. The anima does not offer comfort without challenge. She is a mirror to the soul, reflecting both beauty and shadow. In following her guidance, a man is not led away from himself, but directly into the depths of who he truly is. Shadow integration is one of the most transformative aspects of psychological growth. It refers to the process of acknowledging, confronting, and embracing the unconscious aspects of the self, particularly those qualities or traits that have been repressed or denied. These repressed elements, collectively known as the shadow, are often viewed as the dark or undesirable parts of the personality. The shadow contains not only negative qualities such as anger, greed, jealousy, and selfishness, but also positive traits that have been suppressed due to fear, cultural conditioning, or personal limitations. The act of integrating the shadow is a journey toward self-awareness, authenticity, and emotional wholeness. At the heart of the shadow concept is the idea that the psyche is not a singular, unified whole, but rather a collection of different aspects that often conflict with each other. The conscious mind, the part of us that is aware of our thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, tends to identify with certain traits that society values, such as kindness, discipline, or rationality. But just as there is light, there is also darkness. The parts of ourselves that do not fit into the acceptable or desirable narrative are relegated to the unconscious, the shadow side of our personality. This includes qualities that we judge as unacceptable, behaviors that deviate from societal norms, or emotions that feel too threatening to express, like fear, shame, or rage. The shadow is not inherently evil or harmful. It is simply the parts of the self that are outside of the conscious ego's awareness, often representing aspects of personality or life experience that have been rejected because they are perceived as flaws or weaknesses. These qualities are often buried under layers of defense mechanisms such as denial, repression, or projection. They are not eradicated or erased, but are pushed into the unconscious, where they can operate in secret, influencing our decisions, relationships, and actions in ways we are unaware of. Integrating the shadow requires confronting these repressed aspects and understanding that they are not inherently bad or dangerous. The shadow contains vital energy that, when acknowledged and integrated, can lead to greater self-understanding and emotional growth. This process involves looking inward and asking hard questions. What parts of myself have I denied or hidden? What emotions do I struggle to feel or express? What behaviors do I judge as unacceptable? What aspects of my personality do I reject, and why? When we repress certain qualities, we often do so because we are afraid of what they represent. We might fear that if we acknowledge our anger, for example, it will consume us or harm others. We might fear that recognizing our jealousy or greed will make us appear weak or immoral. But in denying these emotions or behaviors, we fail to understand the deeper roots of our feelings. Anger, for instance, might be a sign of unmet needs or boundaries, and jealousy may point to a fear of losing something we value. When we push these feelings aside, we miss the opportunity to learn from them and transform them into healthier expressions of emotion or behavior. The shadow often manifests in projection, which occurs when we see undesirable qualities in others that we are unwilling to recognize in ourselves. For example, a person who has repressed their own anger might become irritated by the anger of others, projecting their own repressed emotion onto someone else. Similarly, someone who has denied their own sense of inadequacy may become judgmental of others' perceived weaknesses. This projection keeps us locked in a cycle of misunderstanding and conflict, preventing us from recognizing the parts of ourselves that need healing. When we integrate the shadow, we stop projecting it onto others and start owning it as part of our own experience. One of the most difficult aspects of shadow integration is the recognition that the shadow is not just the negative or dark parts of ourselves. It also includes traits that we have rejected because they do not fit with our ideal self-image or societal expectations. For example, a person who prides themselves on being selfless and helpful might repress their own need for self-care or personal boundaries. In doing so, they may overextend themselves, neglecting their own needs in favor of others. The shadow might also contain creative, spontaneous, or playful aspects of the self that are viewed as impractical or childish in adulthood. These qualities, when denied, can lead to feelings of frustration, burnout, or a lack of joy in life. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming controlled by these repressed traits, but learning how to express them in a healthy and constructive way, When we recognize and accept the darker or more vulnerable parts of ourselves, we are less likely to act them out unconsciously. Instead, we can express them consciously in ways that are appropriate and aligned with our values. For instance, anger can be used to set boundaries or advocate for justice. Greed can be transformed into a drive for success or the desire to create wealth for others. The key is not to deny these emotions or behaviors, but to channel them in ways that promote personal growth and social harmony. The process of shadow integration is often uncomfortable because it forces us to confront parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore. It requires humility and self-compassion, as we must be willing to accept our imperfections and flaws. This can be a painful process, especially when we realize how much of our unconscious life has been shaped by these repressed aspects. However, the rewards of shadow integration are immense. When we make the unconscious conscious, we become more whole, more authentic, and more capable of living in alignment with our true selves. Through this process, we not only gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, but also become more empathetic and compassionate toward others. We recognize that everyone has their own shadows, their own struggles, and their own unacknowledged parts. This creates a space for greater connection and understanding in our relationships as we stop seeing others as projections of our own denied traits and begin to appreciate their humanity. Ultimately, shadow integration is about accepting the full spectrum of our experience, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the known and the unknown. It is about coming into alignment with all parts of ourselves, rather than fragmenting or rejecting certain aspects of who we are. By embracing the shadow, we unlock the potential for transformation, growth, and wholeness. It is through this process that we are able to move beyond the constraints of our unconscious fears and limitations and live a life that is more authentic, fulfilling, and integrated. Projection is one of the most intriguing and pervasive mechanisms in the human psyche, deeply embedded in the way we interact with the world and with others. It is a psychological phenomenon in which individuals attribute their own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors to others, especially when these aspects of themselves are uncomfortable, threatening, or difficult to accept. In essence, projection allows individuals to disown parts of themselves that they deem unacceptable, only to see these traits reflected back in the people around them. While this process is largely unconscious, it plays a major role in shaping perceptions, relationships, and personal dynamics. The mechanism of projection operates on a fundamental level of self-defense. When we encounter feelings, desires, or characteristics within ourselves that we deem negative or undesirable, whether due to social conditioning, personal experiences, or unresolved conflicts, we are faced with a psychological challenge. Rather than accept these aspects and integrate them into our self-concept, the mind unconsciously seeks a way to distance itself from these uncomfortable emotions or traits. The solution, it seems, is to project them onto another person, making it appear as though those feelings or behaviors originate outside of ourselves. This serves to maintain a sense of psychological balance, as the individual avoids direct confrontation with their internal conflict. However, it can distort reality and lead to misunderstandings, frustrations, and even conflict. At its core, projection serves as a protective mechanism. It allows individuals to externalize parts of their inner world that they find intolerable, and by doing so, it provides temporary relief from internal tension. For example, a person who harbors feelings of jealousy or insecurity may project these feelings onto others, perceiving that others are jealous or insecure instead. A person who feels guilty about a particular behavior might accuse others of engaging in the same behavior, thus deflecting attention from their own actions. This process keeps uncomfortable truths hidden from the conscious mind, allowing the individual to avoid the distress of confronting their own flaws or vulnerabilities. One of the most common forms of projection occurs in interpersonal relationships, especially in close relationships such as family, friendships, and romantic partnerships. In these contexts, projection can cause significant tension and misunderstandings. For instance, a partner in a relationship who struggles with feelings of inadequacy might project these feelings onto their significant other, accusing them of being judgmental or critical when, in reality, it is the individual projecting the judgment onto themselves. Alternatively, a person who harbors anger or frustration might project these emotions onto a friend, interpreting every action as a slight or an offense, even when no offense has occurred. Projection, in this sense, can create a distorted lens through which we view the behaviors and intentions of others, often leading to unnecessary conflict. Projection also manifests in more subtle ways, often leading to generalized assumptions about entire groups of people. This can be seen in the context of prejudice and stereotyping. When an individual feels threatened by certain characteristics or behaviors that they perceive as other or different from their own, they may project their own negative qualities onto that group. For example, a person who feels powerless in their own life might project feelings of aggression or dominance onto others, perceiving that others are plotting against them or trying to undermine them. In this way, projection can perpetuate cycles of discrimination and social division, as individuals or groups become scapegoats for the unresolved fears and conflicts within the individual's psyche. The projection mechanism is not inherently harmful or pathological. In many cases, it operates as a necessary defense mechanism, allowing individuals to navigate a world that might otherwise overwhelm them emotionally. However, when projection becomes habitual or unchecked, it can create a distorted world view, one in which external relationships and social dynamics are seen through the lens of unresolved personal issues. This can lead to recurring patterns of blame, judgment, and miscommunication, all of which undermine emotional growth and interpersonal harmony. A critical step in overcoming the negative consequences of projection is developing self-awareness. The more we become conscious of the ways in which we project our own thoughts, feelings, and insecurities onto others, the more we can begin to take responsibility for our own internal world. It is through self-reflection and honest introspection that we can begin to see the unconscious patterns of projection that shape our relationships and perceptions of others. Rather than blaming others for the way we feel, we start to ask ourselves why we are having certain reactions and where those emotions are coming from. This shift in perspective allows us to reclaim responsibility for our own thoughts and behaviors, ultimately leading to healthier and more authentic interactions with others. One of the most transformative aspects of projection is its potential for growth and self-discovery. As difficult as it may be to acknowledge, the traits or behaviors we project onto others often contain valuable clues about our own psyche. By examining these projections with curiosity and compassion, we can begin to uncover aspects of ourselves that have been hidden or suppressed. For instance, if we consistently project feelings of insecurity onto others, it may be an indication that we have unresolved self-esteem issues that need attention. If we project anger or frustration onto someone else, it might signal that we have not learned how to express or manage these emotions in a healthy way. In this sense, projection becomes a mirror that reflects our own unconscious thoughts and feelings, providing us with the opportunity to heal and grow. One key aspect of overcoming projection is learning to tolerate uncomfortable emotions. Many of us are conditioned to avoid or suppress emotions that are deemed negative or undesirable, such as anger, sadness, or fear. By projecting these emotions onto others, we avoid the uncomfortable task of facing them within ourselves. However, by learning to sit with these emotions and understand their underlying causes, we can begin to disarm the power of projection. Rather than externalizing our feelings, we begin to integrate them into our conscious experience, allowing them to inform our actions and decisions in healthier ways. Projection also plays a significant role in the dynamics of the shadow, a psychological concept that represents the unconscious aspects of the personality that are repressed or denied. When we project qualities of the shadow onto others, we fail to acknowledge and accept those aspects within ourselves. Shadow work, which involves integrating these repressed parts of the psyche, requires a willingness to confront projection and take ownership of the qualities we are reluctant to acknowledge. By recognizing our projections, we can begin to heal the wounds that keep us locked in these patterns of distortion and denial. Ultimately, projection is a natural part of the human experience. It is a defense mechanism that helps protect us from confronting difficult emotions and inner conflicts. However, it also has the potential to distort our perceptions and hinder personal growth. By becoming aware of the ways in which we project our inner world onto others, we can begin to take responsibility for our own feelings and reactions. This process of self-awareness and integration allows us to break free from the limitations of projection and develop more authentic and meaningful relationships with ourselves and others. Through this journey, we not only gain a deeper understanding of the unconscious forces that shape our behavior, but also create the possibility for true emotional healing and personal transformation. The archetypes of the feminine represent universal patterns of behavior, emotion, and energy that transcend individual experience, culture, and time. These archetypes reflect the multifaceted nature of the feminine psyche and encompass a range of characteristics, both light and dark, nurturing and destructive. They are the deep, symbolic expressions of the feminine in its many forms, representing a rich inner world of myth, history, and personal identity. The study of these archetypes is rooted in the idea that the unconscious mind is filled with universal symbols and motifs, a concept championed by Carl Jung. These symbols, or archetypes, shape our collective experiences and our understanding of ourselves, often influencing how we relate to others, especially in the context of gender and identity. Among the most commonly explored feminine archetypes are the mother, the maiden, the crone, the lover, the warrior, and the queen. These archetypes are not rigid categories but dynamic, living energies that shift and evolve over time, influencing women and men alike. The mother, for example, embodies nurturing, protection, and unconditional love, but she can also represent smothering, overprotection, or dependency. The maiden may symbolize innocence, purity, and new beginnings, yet she can also be naive or disconnected from her own power. The crone is the wise elder who embodies experience, intuition, and transformation, but she can also represent death, decay, and the shadow side of wisdom. The archetype of the mother is perhaps the most fundamental, deeply rooted in both biological and psychological experience. In its positive form, the mother represents nurturing, compassion, and the capacity to give unconditionally. She is the symbol of fertility, creation, and sustenance, the one who provides care and support in the earliest stages of life. The mother archetype is often idealized as the source of warmth, comfort, and emotional security. However, when distorted, the mother archetype can also manifest as the overbearing, controlling figure whose love is conditional, possessive, or suffocating. This smothering aspect of the mother can lead to dependency and hinder personal growth, as it prevents the individual from developing a sense of autonomy and self-reliance. The mother archetype, then, represents both the life-giving and life-restricting aspects of feminine energy, embodying the tension between love and control, care and confinement. The maiden archetype embodies youth, innocence, and untested potential. She is often depicted as the virgin or the untouched, full of promise and possibility. The maiden is connected to the beginnings of a woman's journey, representing purity, freedom, and the joy of self-discovery. She is the one who has not yet experienced the trials of life or the complexities of adult relationships, and her energy is often characterized by exploration, curiosity, and a desire for new experiences. However, the shadow side of the maiden can be found in her naivety, which can leave her vulnerable to exploitation, manipulation, or disillusionment. The maiden archetype can also represent a lack of self-awareness, a disconnection from one's true power or desires. In this way, the maiden is not merely a passive symbol, but a dynamic force of growth and transition, one that opens the door to the deeper layers of the self. The crone archetype is the embodiment of wisdom, experience, and the cycles of life. She represents the transformative power of aging, the deep understanding that comes from having lived through pain, loss, and triumph. The crone is often associated with the later stages of a woman's life, when she has gained a broader perspective on the world and herself. Her energy is often characterized by introspection, intuition, and the ability to see beyond the surface of things. She is the one who has witnessed the fullness of life, and as such, she holds the knowledge of birth, death, and rebirth. However, the crone can also represent the darker aspects of aging, such as fear of irrelevance, bitterness, or the rejection of one's own mortality. In some ways, the crone archetype challenges society's tendency to devalue older women, offering a model of strength and wisdom that is not dependent on physical beauty or youth. The crone is a symbol of transformation, showing that wisdom and power can grow with age, and that there is strength in embracing the fullness of life's experiences. The lover archetype represents passion, sensuality, and emotional connection. This archetype is often associated with the desire for deep intimacy and the celebration of physical and emotional pleasure. The lover is open, receptive, and connected to the rhythms of the body and the heart, embodying the power of love to heal, transform, and unite. She is the one who can experience life in its fullest emotional spectrum, from the joy of ecstasy to the pain of heartbreak. The lover archetype is not limited to romantic relationships, but extends to the full spectrum of human connections, including friendships, artistic endeavors, and the love of life itself. However, when the lover archetype is unbalanced, it can become obsessive or dependent, seeking validation and fulfillment from external sources. The shadow side of the lover can manifest as the lover of illusions, one who seeks fulfillment through unattainable or fleeting desires, never finding true satisfaction. The lover archetype challenges us to embrace our passions while remaining grounded in self, worth, and emotional stability. The warrior archetype is perhaps one of the more powerful and assertive feminine energies. While traditionally associated with masculinity, the warrior also exists within the feminine psyche. The warrior is the protector, the fighter, the one who stands up for what is right and defends the vulnerable. This archetype is characterized by strength, courage, and the will to overcome obstacles. The warrior is not afraid to take action, to face challenges head on, and to stand firm in the face of adversity. The warrior archetype empowers women to claim their personal power, set boundaries, and take charge of their own destiny. However, the shadow side of the warrior can manifest as aggression, ruthlessness, or an inability to express vulnerability. When out of balance, the warrior can become consumed with the desire for control, domination, or perfection. The challenge for the feminine warrior is to balance strength with compassion, power with empathy, and action with introspection. The queen archetype embodies leadership, sovereignty, and self-possession. The queen represents a woman who is in full command of her own life, able to rule over her inner and outer worlds with grace and wisdom. She is not a queen in the traditional sense of power for power's sake, but rather a sovereign who leads with integrity, responsibility, and an understanding of the needs of others. The queen is someone who has a clear vision, a sense of purpose, and the authority to create change in her life and the lives of others. However, the shadow side of the queen can manifest as tyranny, control, or the manipulation of others for personal gain. The queen archetype teaches women to claim their authority, to lead from a place of authenticity, and to recognize that true leadership is rooted in service and empowerment, not domination. Each of these feminine archetypes, the mother, the maiden, the crone, the lover, the warrior, and the queen, represents a distinct and essential aspect of the feminine experience. Together, they form a dynamic, evolving whole, each archetype feeding into and transforming the others. They are not static roles, but fluid energies that emerge at different times in a woman's life, each with its own unique challenges, lessons, and gifts. The key to embracing the full power of these archetypes is not to see them as separate, fixed identities, but as interconnected aspects of the self that are all integral to the process of personal growth and self-realization. Cultural conditioning is a powerful and often invisible force that shapes the way individuals think, behave, and perceive themselves and others. It refers to the process by which people are influenced by the norms, values, beliefs, and practices of the society or culture in which they are raised. From an early age, individuals are exposed to a set of expectations about how they should live, what they should believe, and what behaviors are considered acceptable. These expectations come from various sources, including family, education, media, religion, and peers. The internalization of these cultural norms leads to the formation of identity, social roles, and behaviors that align with the larger cultural framework. However, this conditioning can also limit personal growth and self-expression, as individuals may unknowingly conform to societal expectations that do not resonate with their authentic selves. The process of cultural conditioning begins at birth and continues throughout an individual's life. In infancy, the family unit plays a critical role in the early stages of socialization, teaching children the values and behaviors deemed appropriate in their particular culture. Parents, caregivers, and relatives are often the first to introduce children to gender roles, social hierarchies, and moral codes. For example, in many cultures, boys may be encouraged to express strength and independence, while girls are taught to be nurturing and compliant. These early lessons form the foundation of one's identity, shaping how children understand their place in the world and their relationships with others. As children grow older, they encounter broader social influences, such as schools, media, and peer groups, which further reinforce these cultural norms. In schools, children are not only taught academic subjects, but also socialized into the dominant cultural world view. The curriculum often reflects the values and priorities of the society, whether it is individualism, competition, material success, or communal cooperation. Beyond the formal curriculum, the structure of schools, such as the hierarchy between teachers and students, or the competitive nature of grading systems, reinforces cultural messages about authority, success, and personal worth. In many societies, education is designed to produce individuals who conform to established social structures and roles, preparing them to fit into a larger system that prioritizes certain values over others. Through education, individuals are subtly taught what is considered normal and what is deviant, shaping their sense of self, worth, and social belonging. The media, too, plays a significant role in cultural conditioning. Television, film, advertising, social media, and other forms of mass communication are powerful vehicles for transmitting cultural norms and values. The images and messages portrayed in the media often reflect idealized versions of beauty, success, and happiness, creating unrealistic standards that many individuals strive to attain. For example, media representations of gender roles frequently portray women as passive, nurturing figures or objects of desire, while men are depicted as strong, dominant, and competitive. These portrayals reinforce stereotypes and perpetuate a narrow understanding of what it means to be masculine or feminine. Additionally, the media often promotes consumerism, materialism, and the pursuit of external validation, further shaping individuals' desires and behaviors according to societal expectations. Religion is another significant force in cultural conditioning. Across various cultures, religious institutions provide frameworks for understanding the world, guiding moral and ethical behavior, and shaping individual and collective identity. Religious teachings often dictate how individuals should behave in their personal lives, in their relationships with others, and in their interactions with the divine. For example, many religions have prescribed roles for men and women, with women often positioned as caregivers and men as providers or protectors. These roles are reinforced through religious texts, rituals, and community practices, influencing how individuals perceive their gender identity and their place in the social order. While religion can provide a sense of purpose and community, it can also serve as a mechanism of control, limiting individuals' autonomy and reinforcing cultural norms that may not align with their personal values or experiences. Peer groups and social networks are also powerful agents of cultural conditioning. From childhood to adulthood, individuals are influenced by their social circles as they seek approval and acceptance from those around them. Peer pressure can dictate everything from clothing choices to career aspirations, as individuals conform to the expectations of their friends, colleagues, or social groups. Social networks, particularly in the age of social media, can amplify these pressures as individuals strive to present a curated version of themselves that fits into a particular social mold. In this context, cultural conditioning becomes not only an internalized process but also a public performance, as individuals adapt their behavior to meet the expectations of the larger social group. The desire for social approval and fear of rejection can lead to conformity, where individuals suppress their authentic selves in favor of fitting into a predefined cultural identity. One of the most profound ways cultural conditioning affects individuals is through the internalization of societal expectations regarding gender, race, and class. These social categories are constructed and reinforced through cultural conditioning, dictating how individuals experience their identities and interact with the world. Gender, for example, is often culturally conditioned through the reinforcement of traditional roles that define what it means to be masculine or feminine. Boys may be conditioned to suppress emotional vulnerability and display toughness, while girls may be taught to prioritize relationships and caregiving. These expectations create a limited understanding of gender, ignoring the full spectrum of human experience and expression. As a result, individuals may struggle with internal conflicts or feel pressured to conform to roles that do not reflect their authentic selves. Similarly, cultural conditioning around race and ethnicity plays a crucial role in shaping individuals' experiences and identities. In societies with entrenched racial hierarchies, individuals may internalize stereotypes or biases that influence how they view themselves and others. People of color may face cultural conditioning that reinforces ideas of inferiority or marginalization, while those from dominant racial groups may be conditioned to believe in their own superiority. This conditioning can lead to racial prejudice, discrimination, and inequality as individuals navigate a world shaped by deeply ingrained cultural assumptions about race and power. At the same time, individuals from marginalized racial backgrounds may struggle with feelings of shame or invisibility, as cultural conditioning excludes their experiences or identities from the dominant narrative. Class is another powerful axis of cultural conditioning. In societies where economic and social mobility is limited, individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds may be conditioned to accept their status as fixed, while those from wealthier backgrounds may internalize values of success, achievement, and entitlement. Cultural conditioning reinforces these class distinctions, creating barriers to upward mobility and perpetuating cycles of poverty or privilege. The expectation to conform to certain standards of success based on wealth or status can create feelings of inadequacy for those who do not fit this mold, leading to emotional distress, self-doubt, and a sense of alienation. Cultural conditioning also plays a critical role in shaping how individuals understand and respond to emotions, relationships, and self-expression. In some cultures, for example, the expression of vulnerability or emotions like sadness, fear, or anger is discouraged, especially for men, who may be conditioned to suppress their feelings in favor of stoicism or dominance. This emotional repression can lead to issues with mental health, as individuals struggle to navigate their emotions in a healthy way. Similarly, in cultures that prioritize individual achievement and competition, the importance of community, cooperation, and emotional connection may be downplayed, leading to a sense of isolation or disconnection from others. Breaking free from cultural conditioning is a complex and ongoing process that requires self-awareness, critical reflection, and a willingness to challenge deeply held beliefs and assumptions. It involves recognizing the ways in which cultural norms have shaped one's identity and behaviors, and deciding consciously which aspects to retain and which to reject. It also requires creating spaces for individuals to explore and express their authentic selves, free from the constraints of societal expectations. This process of deconditioning is not easy, as it often involves confronting deeply ingrained patterns of thought and behavior, but it is a necessary step toward personal empowerment and liberation. Through this process, individuals can reclaim their autonomy, embrace their uniqueness, and create new ways of being that are more aligned with their true selves, rather than with the expectations imposed by the culture around them. Individuation is the psychological process of integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche to achieve a unified, whole self. It is a central concept in Carl Jung's analytical psychology, and represents a lifelong journey of personal development, self-awareness, and transformation. Unlike traditional views of development that emphasize external achievement or social conformity, individuation focuses on the internal process of self-realization, where an individual becomes more attuned to their true nature, transcending the ego and integrating the various aspects of their personality, both light and shadow. The individuation process is not a linear or straightforward path, but a dynamic ever-evolving journey that leads individuals toward greater authenticity and wholeness. At the heart of individuation is the confrontation with the unconscious. Jung proposed that the human psyche is made up of both conscious and unconscious components, and true personal growth occurs when these aspects are brought into harmony. The unconscious is not simply a repository of repressed thoughts and memories. It is a vast, rich source of wisdom, creativity, and hidden potential. However, much of the unconscious remains hidden from conscious awareness due to the limitations of the ego, which acts as the center of self-identity. To individuate, an individual must move beyond the confines of the ego and embrace the unconscious aspects of the psyche. This process often involves a deep confrontation with the shadow, the darker, repressed parts of the self that individuals may find uncomfortable or undesirable. The shadow contains those qualities that the conscious mind rejects, such as weakness, anger, jealousy, or fear. These are traits that society, family, or culture may deem unacceptable, leading individuals to suppress or deny them. However, the shadow does not simply go away because it is repressed. It continues to exert influence over behavior, often in subtle and unconscious ways. The individuation process requires that individuals confront these hidden parts of themselves, accept their existence, and integrate them into their conscious awareness. This confrontation can be uncomfortable and challenging, as it often requires individuals to acknowledge aspects of themselves that they have long avoided or disowned. However, by doing so, individuals gain greater self-knowledge and begin to develop a more balanced and integrated sense of self. Integration of the shadow is just one aspect of individuation. Another critical component is the development of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine aspects of the psyche. Jung argued that every individual, regardless of gender, carries within them both feminine and masculine qualities. The anima represents the feminine aspect of the psyche in men, while the animus represents the masculine aspect in women. These inner figures are not merely symbolic but active components of the unconscious that shape thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. The anima and animus can manifest in various ways, such as dreams, fantasies, and projections, and they influence how individuals relate to the opposite sex. During the individuation process, individuals must become aware of their anima or animus and integrate these qualities into their conscious self. This involves moving beyond stereotypes of gender roles and embracing the full spectrum of human experience. For example, a man may need to acknowledge and integrate his emotional, nurturing, and receptive qualities, which have traditionally been associated with femininity, while a woman may need to embrace her assertive, rational, and independent qualities, which have been associated with masculinity. By integrating the anima or animus, individuals can transcend the limitations of traditional gender identities and embrace a more holistic understanding of themselves. This integration leads to a greater sense of inner harmony and a more balanced expression of both masculine and feminine energies. A key aspect of the individuation process is the development of the self, which Jung considered the central archetype of the psyche. The self represents the totality of the unconscious and conscious mind, encompassing both the ego and the deeper, transcendent aspects of the psyche. It is the ultimate goal of individuation, the realization of one's full potential as an integrated whole person. The self is not an isolated or fixed entity. It is an ongoing process of becoming, a dynamic and evolving force that drives personal growth and transformation. As individuals progress through the stages of individuation, they move closer to the realization of the self, experiencing moments of insight, creativity, and spiritual awakening. One of the challenges of the individuation process is reconciling the ego with the self. The ego, which represents the individual's conscious sense of identity, is often resistant to change and fearful of losing control. It tends to cling to familiar patterns and beliefs, as they provide a sense of stability and security. However, the ego is not the entirety of the self. It is merely a limited aspect of the psyche. To individuate, individuals must learn to loosen their attachment to the ego and allow the deeper, unconscious aspects of the psyche to emerge. This requires a willingness to let go of old identities, roles, and attachments that no longer serve the individual's growth. It also involves developing a deeper connection with the inner self, which may require engaging with spiritual practices, dreams, or other forms of self-exploration. Dreams play a significant role in the individuation process, serving as a direct link to the unconscious mind. Jung believed that dreams are a means through which the unconscious communicates with the conscious mind, offering insight, guidance, and healing. In dreams, symbols and archetypes from the collective unconscious emerge, providing clues to unresolved conflicts, unacknowledged aspects of the self, and potential paths for personal growth. The individuation process involves paying attention to and interpreting these dreams, using them as a tool for self-discovery and integration. Jung also emphasized the importance of active imagination, a technique that involves engaging with the images and symbols from the unconscious in a conscious, creative way. By dialoguing with these unconscious elements, individuals can gain deeper insight into their inner world and facilitate the process of integration. Individuation is not a solitary or self-centered process. It is inherently relational. As individuals become more integrated and self-aware, their relationships with others also transform. One of the effects of individuation is the ability to relate to others in a more authentic, compassionate, and empathetic way. The process encourages individuals to move beyond the projections and unconscious patterns that influence their interactions, allowing them to engage with others as whole, complex individuals. This deeper connection to others fosters a sense of community, understanding, and shared humanity, which are essential for emotional and psychological well-being. The individuation process also has a spiritual dimension. Jung saw individuation as a path to wholeness that transcends the limitations of the ego and the material world. It is a journey toward the realization of one's highest potential, which includes not only personal growth, but also a deeper connection to the divine or transcendent. Jung was influenced by various spiritual traditions, including Christianity, Hinduism, and Taoism, and he believed that the process of individuation was a spiritual quest, a search for meaning, purpose, and connection with the larger universe. Through individuation, individuals can experience moments of spiritual awakening where they sense a deeper unity with all of existence. The individuation process is not easy, nor is it quick. It requires courage, patience, and a willingness to confront the darker aspects of the psyche. It is a journey fraught with obstacles, confusion, and discomfort, but it is also a path of profound transformation and growth. As individuals progress along the path of individuation, they become more attuned to their true nature, shedding the layers of societal conditioning and ego-based identities that obscure their authentic self. The goal of individuation is not to achieve perfection or an idealized self, but to become more fully who one truly is, embracing both the light and the shadow, the masculine and the feminine, the conscious and the unconscious. It is a process of becoming whole, of integrating all aspects of the self into a unified, authentic expression of who we are meant to be. Through individuation, individuals experience the joy and liberation of self-realization, and they move toward a deeper sense of peace, meaning, and connection with the world around them.